Good afternoon, Pnawn da, and thank you for joining me today. This afternoon in the Chamber, I'll be outlining our vision for moving the Welsh economy forward post-pandemic. This will be based around a Team Wales model that offers as much certainty as possible for businesses facing a volatile recovery. I'm excited about the opportunity that we have to create a stronger, greener and fairer Welsh economy. But this will be made significantly more difficult if the UK government does not honour its promises made on EU successor funds for Wales. The UK Community Renewal and Levelling Up funds, which have excluded the Welsh Government and are controlled by UK government ministers, are denying Wales the vital investment needed to help create jobs. Our framework for investing replacement EU funds builds on years of partner engagement. It is based on evidence and agreement with clear priorities for Wales. This is what a Team Wales approach looks like. Instead, we remain in the dark about funding for Wales and what we will receive from a UK government that has so far been missing in action. The upcoming spending review is an opportunity for the UK government to demonstrate its ambition for Wales. So I call on the Chancellor and on Michael Gove to ensure that Wales will make decisions about how our EU replacement funds are spent. Positive signs would include the full replacement of EU funding that we were promised repeatedly, support for major renewable energy and urgent help for the steel sector that we all rely upon, funding to remediate our coal tips, allowing us to invest in the tech, the jobs and the skills this work would offer to valley communities, and Wales's fair share of research and development investment to help us create the jobs of tomorrow. However, the signs are that the spending review could spell tough decisions for us when taking this work forward. This would mean a hard look at priorities if the UK government refuses to reverse a needless power grab. Now, yesterday I held an economic summit where I set out our vision for an economic policy that focuses on better jobs, narrowing the skills divide and tackling poverty. We plan to work with unions, businesses and local government to continue to develop a something for something approach so that Welsh public money is wedded to action on fair work, decarbonisation and skills. We also need to start a conversation about the long-term demographic challenge facing the Welsh economy. The proportion of our population aged 16 to 64 years old in Wales has been decreasing since mid-2008, and it could fall to just 58% of the population by the 2040s. In response, our approach will be geared towards creating an economy where more young people feel confident about planning their future in Wales. That will support job creation and more dynamic local economies. It's my hope that by taking bold action, we will create a future where more young people feel that they don't need to get out to get on. A Wales where an inclusive, sustainable economy attracts people to live, work, study and contribute to our long-term success. Supporting stronger local economies with better paid work is essential to the job of tackling poverty, as well as sustaining the Welsh language among young people in rural Wales in particular. At the same time, if more people positively choose to come to work in Wales, we can address the risks that come with the decline in our working age population. This is a long-term challenge that we simply cannot put off. My ambition is to make Wales a place where young people feel hopeful and excited about planning their future. So we will develop a coherent and compelling offer and explore further graduate retention opportunities, building strong linkages with universities and businesses. I'm also keen to support startups and to encourage the growth of more firms with more jobs that are grounded here in Wales. Since I became the Economy Minister in May, I've seen firsthand the challenges that some businesses face in grappling with the tail end of the pandemic and the early volatility and still uncertainty about the recovery. I've also seen the value of our Team Wales model that is stronger than ever since the pandemic hit. The easy path would be to rush to headline grabbing positions with announcements that then unravel in a matter of days. But we can see that this path costs businesses, erodes trusts, and leaves whole communities in the dark about their future. It creates chaos, and it will never be how this Welsh Government does business. There is substance behind the Team Wales model, and it will be the foundation of a Team Wales recovery built by all of us. As we face the headwinds of Brexit reality, I'm determined that our credible plans will offer as much certainty as possible to help our businesses to plan ahead. We will pull every lever that we can as a government to prevent wasted talent in a recovery fit for the long term. So we will offer more workers on low-pay, quality, flexible courses with personal learning accounts designed to boost their earnings potential. And we'll build on our proven record on apprenticeships, delivering a further 125,000 places within this Welsh parliamentary term. And our upcoming employability and skills strategy will build on our record of narrowing the skills divide with a focus on those furthest away from the labour market. I want our support to accelerate the adoption of new skills required for the quality, secure jobs that a low-carbon economy will rely on. This will include the growth of Green Union representatives to help ensure that our transition to net zero is fair for working people. We'll go on developing the something for something approach and strengthen our economic contract. If we're serious about building a stronger Welsh economy, Welsh public money has to support fair work, action on climate change, and the skills that unlock talent across Wales. We will launch our Backing Local Firms Fund to support more dynamic local economies. I'll say more next month about how our foundational economy delivery plan will help to shorten supply chains, to lower emissions, and to turn our plans across housing, transport and energy into better jobs closer to home. Wales is a proud home for world-leading manufacturing sectors like automotive, steel and aerospace. And we will partner with them with intent of support to help them to innovate, to grow, and to move to a low-carbon future that sustains great jobs right across Wales. This task is urgent in our steel sector. I have met with the industry, steel unions and UK ministers regularly on this issue, which has a hugely disproportionate impact upon Wales. We do not have all the levers, and the time is now for the UK government to act. I am keen for a constructive plan where our support complements action from a UK government, but that will only be possible when decisions are finally taken in Westminster. My message to the UK government is a clear one. Bring forward your deal and let's get on a joint plan for a thriving steel sector in a secure and low-carbon economy. Thank you. I'll now take questions from the media. And the first question today is Hugh Thomas from BBC Wales.
Gweinidog, could I ask you about investment in renewables and in decarbonisation first, because the UK government has announced subsidies today to help people replace old gas boilers with heat pumps, along with some other announcements to decarbonise buildings and industry. When did you hear about these plans? What impact will this Westminster net zero strategy have on your own plans in Wales? That's especially given this call today from Renewable UK Cymru for immediate action by the Welsh Government to capitalise on renewable energy opportunities here, which they say needs to happen before the action on that moves elsewhere.
Okay, so the first that I heard was when the briefing went out last night about heat pumps. That's obviously disappointing because this is an agenda where all governments in the UK have a stake, because all of our people in every part of the UK and beyond have a stake in the transition to a lower carbon economy here in Wales and to reach net zero. We had asked to have a greater conversation before the UK agreed their own plans, because there will be a direct read across an impact here in Wales as well. Now, Julie James will set up more about our transition to net zero before the end of this month, ahead of COP26. But despite the fact there hasn't been the sort of conversation that we would have wanted, I think people across Wales would have expected, we still see opportunities in what's been announced. So, for example, if there is really going to be support for more people to have heat pumps, then actually there's a challenge there about skills and making sure that we have people who are trained to take advantage of be able to do that work, to both install these around homes, but also to make sure they're properly maintained. So there's an opportunity for us to work. And again, that comes back to the points I've made repeatedly about the need to have certainty on replacement EU funds. Because actually our skills programme is funded by about a third of our apprenticeship funding comes from those former European Union funds. So we're going to be able to match up those opportunities together with the skills training that's required, then it really does require certainty. And I just don't think that any member of any established political party here in Wales would want to see a UK government choice that could undermine our apprenticeship training programme. That's why we really do need a constructive conversation between all of us for us to take the action on the transition to net zero we all want to see. And that would also mean we could take advantage of the new supply chains that will be created as more renewable energy is created off our shores here in Wales.
Diolch. Can I ask you separately about where the government now stands on the issue of a public inquiry into the pandemic in Wales, a Welsh-specific one? Because the First Minister had not ruled out a Welsh public inquiry into the pandemic, but last night he tweeted that he'd been given guarantees by the Prime Minister that the UK inquiry will have a proper Welsh dimension. Does that mean he has had the reassurance he wanted and is now ruling out a Wales-only inquiry? And you'll appreciate there's some anger from those who wanted a Wales-only inquiry, not least the bereaved families who recently met the First Minister and were told that they'd be kept informed about this.
Well, I think there are two slightly different things. The reality is that anybody who is committed to a Wales-only inquiry, I understand they would be disappointed if a UK inquiry took place without a specific Welsh one. But the First Minister has always been clear that the preference is for a joined-up UK inquiry that properly looks at decisions that we have made here in Wales, but also how those are connected to UK-wide choices. From testing, the vaccine supply, how we all went together on the first lockdown, the reality where advice came from, the scientific advice, what we created here in Wales, but also the UK-wide advice that we were all relying on as well, and the choices around borders, where there's an undeniable UK element to it. Now, there was a constructive conversation last night between the First Minister and the Prime Minister. That's what the First Minister was reflecting. What, of course, we need to see is that those commitments are made real in the actual written terms of reference for any inquiry. And if those written terms meet the expectations of the First Minister to ensure there is a proper searching element to this inquiry that properly examines Welsh choices that this government made, as well as those whole UK choices, then we'll have the inquiry that the First Minister has been very upfront and honest about that is our preference. If, however, the terms don't meet those expectations, and the First Minister has not ruled out a Welsh-only inquiry, but we're doing exactly what we've transparently said we do, and I'm sure, and I know the First Minister is committed to meeting families, bereaved families here in Wales again. I expect that the inquiry will be difficult for all of us. I expect that I'll be giving evidence to that inquiry and having to answer questions about choices that I made as part of this government. It's the scrutiny that I expect to happen, and I really do understand there's a real desire for that scrutiny, for lessons learning, and for some form of justice and understanding. So we're committed to doing that in the best way possible. Thank you, Hugh. I've now got Dean Thomas Welch from ITV Wales.
Afternoon, Minister. You've outlined your plan for the economic future for Wales. In response to that, the Welsh Conservatives described it as an admission of failure of 22 years of Labour rule in Wales. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's the typical response you expect from the Welsh Tories. It doesn't really reflect the reality of where we are in the history of devolution. Productivity has risen, wages have risen. Our challenge, though, is that we still need to do more and to travel faster. If you look at employment rates in Wales today, they're better than the UK average. That wasn't the case 20 years ago at the start of the devolution journey. And of course, at the start of each term, it's important that you look again at where you are and consider what to do. If we hadn't set out at this point in time, at the tail end of the pandemic, hopefully, what we want to do about recovery and resilience for the Welsh economy, then the Welsh Conservatives would have simply have issued a different press release criticising us for not having a plan. What's important is we have set out what we're going to do. We need to see choices made in the UK spending review and budget that enable us to make those choices here in Wales, but we have a really firm base to build on, with businesses, trade unions and local government as active and trusted partners, and that Team Wales approach will be the basis upon which we build the fairer, greener, just transition that we want to see here in Wales.
Wales still lags behind the rest of the UK when it comes to wages. Do you think that's a key issue to tackle if you are to do what you set out to do, and that's to keep young, talented people working in Wales?
Well, it's circular, isn't it? Because if we keep young, talented people in Wales, we're likely to see more jobs, more businesses created. If we can successfully persuade those people to start up their own businesses, they're more likely to create more jobs. If we actually do something like arresting the decline of our working age population, well, we should broaden and expand our tax base as well. So we should have a positive impact. Now, it goes back to these conversations about skills and investment and the importance of having certainty in how we make those choices here in Wales. So if we don't generate a larger share, a fair share of the research and development funding that goes across the UK, it will make our task more difficult. If we can't have certainty on the ability to invest in skills growth, it'll make our task more difficult. If we can't have certainty on how we fund our development bank and the support it provides for businesses that want to expand and grow jobs in Wales, it will make our task more difficult. And conversely, if we get certainty on those things, if we're clear about our ability to make those choices and invest in future choices, then our task will be much more likely to succeed. So there's challenge, yes, but there should also be a route for optimism and an expectation that we really can do this. That's high-skilled jobs, as well as getting people who are at this point in time further away from the labour market back into work and into good work. So I think there is room for optimism within the challenge. Thank you, Jean. I've now got Ruth Masowski from Wales Online.
Minister, you've said that you were disappointed not to be told about the UK government announcement on heat pump grants. Your colleague Lead Waters has tweeted saying that it will only help 0.3% of Welsh homes anyway. Is that the figure as you understand it today? And can you tell us what it means for the way that the two governments are working together, that Welsh Government wasn't even informed about this?
Well, the Deputy Minister for Climate Change has tweeted where he understands the figures. So I don't have those to my fingertips. I'm not going to try and give a different answer on the spot. But it does show that there are still challenges in areas where the two governments could and should be able to work more closely together. And it's a consistent call from businesses, actually. They're agnostic about the politics of the two governments. They just want to see the two governments using the different levers we have to make the biggest possible difference. And actually on that, as well as, I think, being very clear where we disagree with the UK government, we've always said we want there to be a more constructive relationship. And that's definitely where we want to see the relationship move, because we could do more on this if we had the opportunity to work more closely together. And as I said earlier, if we're going to see more heat pumps produced and installed in homes, we're going to ramp that up from the initial start, then we need to have the skills in place to make sure that happens. And on that, we've got the responsibility for skills, and certainty about that funding would mean we could do more to create what should be good jobs for Welsh people, and that would have a real benefit to the UK's transition towards greater energy efficiency and net zero.
Thank you. On a different topic, we haven't had stats yet for how the booster programme in Wales is going to help the older and more vulnerable people here. But there are concerns from different parts of the UK about how slowly it's going. Can you give us the latest from Cabinet and how you see that programme's going at the moment?
We're positive about how the booster programme is going. We're going to start to report figures from next week, so you won't need to rely on an understanding and impression. You'll see the figures. And as you've seen throughout this, we've tried to be transparent about where we are on the vaccine rollout. But people should have confidence in the way that we have designed and delivered the vaccine programme through the last several months. You think about the initial concern about how slowly we were moving. Within a few months, it was recognised Wales was moving very fast and in a sustained and sustainable way. If you look at the fact we're making very real progress on the 16 to 18 rollout, nearly 3/4 of that age group have now had at least one dose. We're not far off a third of people in the 12 to 15 age group as well. I'm actually going to be in that category of people who will receive a booster. So I'm looking forward to receiving my invitation, and I'll certainly be taking up the opportunity to increase protection for me, my family and people that I care about when that invitation comes. Next week, you'll get to start seeing figures and the regular updating of them. But at this point in time, we don't have concerns about how we're trying to manage the rollout with the NHS. It's really about making sure that the public respond to the invitations to get themselves protected. And that would be good not just for the health of the nation, but obviously for our economic future as well. Thank you, Ruth. And I've got Peter Gillibrand from LBC.
Hello, my Gweinidog. Just a quick clarification. When from next week will you be publishing the booster stats? Is that from Monday?
That's my expectation, that from Monday, that's when the booster stats will start to be published.
And in terms of the COVID vaccine, a big topic at the moment is the waning effect of the vaccine. Is that a concern that's being looked at in Cabinet? It certainly seems from the stats that it is starting potentially to wear off.
Yes, so we have this challenge, don't we, in that the vaccines we have, there are new vaccines, and so whilst they were safe and we knew they'd be highly effective when they'd be given, with any vaccine, we know there's a potential waning in the immunity that it provides. Now, the fact that it appears to have provided at least 5 to 6 months of good protection is really important. We wouldn't have been able to recover lots of the freedoms that we have without that. We are obviously looking at the evidence that our scientists are providing on whether waning immunity is a real factor, and if so, how much. But the fact that we're providing a booster program, I think, should highlight the fact that we're taking account of the fact that it could be a factor in the harm we could see in Wales if we weren't to provide that booster program. And again, it's a real encouragement for people to take up the opportunity to get their booster when offered. We're looking at international evidence too on what's happening with immunity in different countries, and it's partly the fact that the UK moved faster than some European countries, for example, in getting our programme up and running, and it may be the case we're seeing an earlier impact from waning immunity here compared to others, but there's still uncertainty about that. What we can be certain about, I think this is the most important point, is that getting your full protection is the best way to protect yourselves, people around you, and actually to avoid the need to take any further restrictions to protect both the health of the nation, but also our economic future as well. So when the time comes, if you're invited to have a follow-up, or you're in the younger age group, having your first doses, please do get your vaccination. It's safe and it's effective, and it will help to protect all of us.
And a commission examining Wales's future relationship with the rest of the UK is set to consider Welsh independence. In terms of your role as Wales's Economi Minister, is this a credible option for the future of the Welsh economy?
Well, I'm very clear, as indeed is this government led by Welsh Labour, that we don't think independence is a preferable choice. We think it has more risks and is unlikely to lead to a healthier, more prosperous nation. But in having an independent commission that we're establishing, they're going to need to look at all options, then come up with recommendations for us. There should be no surprise in any of that. We had a manifesto commitment to establishing an independent commission. I look forward to seeing what happens when that commission reports back. But actually, if we want to look at our economic future here in Wales, I've already set out challenges for the immediate period of time. In terms of the Constitution, what we really need is we need some respect for the choices that the people of Wales have made in 2 different referenda on ensuring that this place, this government and our Cynhadledd exists and has a range of powers that the people of Wales have decided upon. So I'd call again on the UK to think again about their approach, not just in the Internal Market Act, but overreaching into powers that the people of Wales have determined where they should sit is entirely the wrong approach, not just for devolution, but for the future of the Union, that I continue to believe a successful union is the best way forward for the people of Wales and indeed the wider UK. Thank you, Peter. And I've got Owen Hughes in the Daily Post.
Good afternoon, Minister. Given the importance of Wilver and Charlesford in North Wales, What discussions are taking place with UK government on ensuring bringing nuclear to those sites? And are UK government doing enough to bring companies there?
Well, we've established a company, Gyda, to look at the future for Trawsfynydd in particular, where there's an opportunity not just for a smaller reactor, but also a research reactor. Because as you know, when I was a health minister, one of our big concerns about Brexit and here we are now was actually medical radioisotopes for treatment in our health service. Now, we do know there's going to be a gap in the not too distant future in radioisotope production. So we're going to need to have an alternative place to produce that. And there's an opportunity to do that in the UK where Trawsfynydd is the ideal site. Now, that requires the UK government to work with us to do that because of the different split in powers. I think there's a real opportunity there to not just provide something useful for the health service, but real economic gain for that part of North West Wales. The same is the case on Anglesey, where the Wilver project is still seen by many people within the nuclear power sector as probably the best site for a new nuclear station anywhere in the UK. Part of our challenge is that having gone a long way down the path with the Horizon project previously, there is some scepticism about whether the UK government will make all of those choices. Now, what I want to see is the UK government being really clear about what's going to happen. From an energy security point of view, we know we'll see nuclear power fall off in a couple of different sites where they're going to have to be decommissioned in the not too distant future. And if there is going to be another generation of nuclear power in the UK, then those choices need to be made in the fairly near future. I hope that through the spending review and beyond, we'll get more certainty about that. And it certainly is an issue that I've raised directly with UK ministers, including Kwasi Kwarteng, in some of the conversations we've had. So I do look forward to not just a constructive conversation, but ultimately to some real decisions that people can rely upon and allow us to potentially see what that means for the future of not just an industry here in Wales, but obviously jobs, people and energy security.
Thank you, Minister. Another point, tourism. What part is tourism going to play in the economic plan? And how are you going to raise wages and skills in that sector? And also maybe mitigate some of the negative impacts of things like second homes?
Okay, so we've already had a really useful and positive engagement with the tourism sector, the tourism, the hospitality sector, and looking at campaigns to encourage people to look at careers, not just short-term jobs within those sectors, but genuine careers that exist. And actually, because of some of the changes that have taken place during and post the pandemic, we've seen labour shortage in some of those areas. So that has actually meant that many of those businesses have had to look again at both the terms on which those jobs are offered, the flexibility around them, but also the wages as well. Now, there's an ongoing challenge about how we make sure that tourism that does have a huge economic impact here in Wales is done on a basis where jobs are protected and enhanced, but also it's done on a sustainable basis. That's sustainable in terms of those communities that see benefit from tourism, but also some of the challenges that come with it, but also sustainable in the way that people behave when they're here, to make sure that people don't leave an unpleasant footprint from their visit and enjoying what Wales has to offer. Now, I'm positive about our ability to do that, to extend the season as well, and to do that hand in hand with people working in the tourism sector. That will, of course, need some balance about ensuring that where people stay has a really sustained community around it. It's also why it's important we carry forward our conversation about what a tourism levy could look like, to invest in infrastructure within those communities to make sure there is a real benefit and an opportunity to see real gain from it. I think you'll hear more from us and the sector, not just over the coming months, but in the years ahead, because I do think there's a very bright future for the tourism sector here in Wales. I've now got Tom Magner from Carers World Live.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. When you held the health portfolio, you would presumably advocate within the Welsh Government for health and social care resources. Now, as Economy Minister, your priority has no doubt changed to getting the country moving again. When crunch points come, as inevitably they must do, would you allow health issues in the ongoing pandemic to get worse, as long as there's change for the better for businesses who, it seems, some say, would prefer to forget the pandemic still very much exists?
Well, when I was Health Minister, of course I made the case for investment in the future of our health and social care system, and it was a key priority for the government in the last term, and it will be again in this one. But as a health minister, I never forgot that I was a minister in a government and not simply existing on my own in a different place. And as a health minister, I never forgot that the economic future and well-being of the country matters hugely to our healthcare system. Because actually, when you look at maps of healthcare inequalities and where there is the worst health challenge that we face in communities in Wales, it's almost always where our least well-off communities are as well. So there's a challenge and a balance for every minister to understand we're part of a whole government enterprise. And I don't think I've ever seen it as a simple dichotomy between you either want more jobs or you want a better health service. Actually, our challenge and our balance is how we have the right health and social care system to care for people properly and the economic benefit that provides, and at the same time to make sure we have a good and healthy economic future, which is what I've been trying to set out both today, later in the Chamber, but at yesterday's Economic Summit as well.
Well, we look forward to seeing how that develops. Viewers to carers worldwide too have a fine balance. If you're an unpaid carer who often has a part-time job, how would you feel if a decision of yours caused people to have to give up that job, conceivably force them into poverty, the very poverty that you want to try to tackle? You mentioned personal learning opportunities. That wouldn't be enough, would it?
Well, I think it's about what choice would I make that would make someone give up their part-time work as a direct result of a choice that I've made, and then the challenge that provides for their ability to have an income as well as what it means for their caring responsibilities. And I don't think that the rollout of personal learning accounts is going to make that more likely that people have to make that choice, because personal learning accounts are flexible ways of learning and investing in someone's future. And there's a challenge here for providers to make sure that they have the flexibility to take account of people's life and work patterns. So that's part of the challenge, the flexibility and the offer. And there are many providers who actually manage to do that in a way where distance learning means that's possible, as well as, if you like, the more traditional ways of learning in a class or a lecture room as well. So I wouldn't expect that I would make a choice that would harm the ability of carers to undertake part-time work, or indeed to make a choice that meant that they couldn't access opportunities to improve their ability to access good, well-paid work as well. But as you say, Tom, life very much is a balance. And for some people, the balance is often tipped by what their caring responsibilities mean, the wider support they have, and indeed the job they have too. So you can expect not just me, but ministers in the Health and Social Care Department to have more to say about what we will continue to do with and for carers in the rest of this government term.
Thank you.
Many thanks for your time, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again.